Welcome back to the Aussie shed, ladies and gentlemen. I can't put it off any longer. Today we start linishing the ways of the lathe bed. The method I'm going to use for doing this is by fixing emery paper to the underside of the saddle in varying grits, starting off with a coarse grit and clamping up the back plate and the front plate depending on which one we're doing. We'll do one side at a time. We'll do the back plate first, then we'll do the front plate and try and take off those high areas. As you remember, this increases in thickness as we go up towards where the chuck normally mounts, and it was the opposite on the front way. It's thicker towards this end here. So I'll show you the setup that I'm using. So here we are with the saddle. Where I'm going to start is on the back way, which is this side of the saddle. You can see I already have an extension that I've made up for the saddle that increases the area across the back so that we can get a larger, flatter back plate on that will give us a hell of a lot more strength and stiffness to the saddle. It also has grub screws that run down through these 3 points that you can use to put tension on the back plate as well to increase the stiffness again, and also to use that to give you a little bit more tension if you need it in a particular spot. So I made those up quite a while ago, and I've assembled it all just because I think it will give me a lot more clamping pressure on the emery paper in this situation. So what I'll be doing is putting a spacer down first. This is a large shim that I've made out of a piece of copper plate. It's 1mm, which is roughly the thickness that this part of the saddle is shy of reaching the underside of the back way by. So this plate will mount on here first, and these are the pieces of emery cloth that I've been cutting that I'm going to use for this. What it is, it's a sanding belt that I purchased from the hardware store, and it's roughly the right width for what I need, as you can see. So there's my my back plate. So what I'm doing is just slicing off. So I've got belts with various grit. This is a 40 grit belt, which is what I'm starting with. So what I've done is pre-cut a whole heap of these pieces, and what I'll be doing is mounting them onto the saddle and then clamping them with the back plate so they're held really well in position, because obviously you want to be able to apply quite a bit of force to them and you don't want them to move. So I have to drill holes. I find just drilling holes through the paper is the easiest thing to do. It gives me the best result rather than trying to just make holes. And if you've got a hole punch, maybe that's something that will work. But I'll give you a demo of what I do. So here's our emery paper, and here's the back plate. So what we've got to do basically is just line them up. I've just got a scrap piece of marine ply here. Line it up so that it's flush with the edges. Sit it down onto your ply, making sure it's all good. Yep, that looks pretty damn good. Now I'm just using a couple of quick grip clamps, a couple of pistol grip rubber clamps. You can get quite a bit of pressure on these guys. Obviously they're designed for a purpose. You wouldn't be wanting to be using them to clamp steel beams together with or something like that, but for this kind of thing they are ideal. The rubber gives quite a bit of friction. So what we've got there is, you know, the paper's held firmly between the back plate and the timber, so it's not going to go doing anything crazy when we drill the holes. I'll just run a drill through these, quick and easy. Bob's your uncle, Uncle Bob. Okay, so there's our piece. All we need to do now to get this ready is to slip it over face down, so our abrasive face is against the surface. Drop our back plate on, so you can see that you can just look in there with the camera that the paper comes out flush with the face, which is hard against the back of the lathe bed, and that's our surface there. You can see it on both areas there. So that's our abrasive medium in exactly the spot where we want it. You can see the shim is giving us the right thickness that we need, just to help with the stability, so we don't have any kind of rocking action going on. I can, once I nip it up, use these set screws to, if there's any gap, to adjust that so we don't get any rock and roll. Now I'm using nylock nuts on here, just purely because I found that just using normal nuts, they start to come loose through the process, and we don't want that. We'll just snug these up a little bit. And take it over to the lathe bed. Okay, we're all set up on the lathe now. Before I mounted the saddle, before I slid the saddle on, I just sprayed a bit of WD-40 onto the top of the paper there before I slid it on, and sprayed a bit of lube up underneath the way there. So how you need to approach this with the tension on the back plate here is, we have thickness on this end that we're trying to get rid of. So what you need to do is, when you're setting the tensions, I just have a 10mm spanner here that I'm using to tighten those nylock nuts down with. You need to leave the end that you are approaching the thick area with slightly loose, so that basically the back plate on the underside of the saddle is like this. So you're tighter at the back end and looser at the front end, only slightly, and that's so that you slide into the area that you're trying to reduce the thickness on, and then cut it with the area on the back half of the paper. Because what you'll find is, if you try to get it flat or have too much tension on the front here, it'll bind quite quickly on the thick area and cause it to just wear the paper on the front, and it won't act, and it'll be much more effort to get it to actually slide into that area. You'll find it will basically just butt up against it and won't actually cut there. So like I say, imagine my hands. Oh, that's not real easy to do. Imagine my hands are the saddle and the back plate. So you just have it like that, so that you're going that way. So you're more open on this end and a little bit tighter on this end. So as you're hitting it, the high area is forced into the tightness in the back area here, and you'll actually start wearing away at it. So you obviously want to set the tension on the back of the saddle here, so that it's tight enough that will get you over the high spot with a bit of effort, so that you're actually applying some good, some good sort of sanding. So it's just a matter of just working it backwards and forwards adjusting the tension, you'll quickly become aware of the areas and what you need to do. It'll become self-evident as you start doing it. Another thing that I've noticed is this is all quite sharp, particularly this new piece that I've made up on the back and this front edge of the saddle here. So I've just got an old pair of rigger's gloves that I use for work, just to protect my hands a little bit while I'm doing this, because like I say, it is quite sharp, and it will after a while, because there's lots of work involved in this. I've had a little bit of a crack at it, a bit of a preemptive crack, just so that I know the setup, so I can explain it better to you guys on YouTube without just jumping straight into it and not really knowing what I'm talking about at that point. And my hands were getting super sore. I was putting rags and all sorts of things over the top, but old pair of leather gloves, absolutely perfect. Most importantly, you really need to anchor down the lathe bed, as I did previously when I was working on the saddle. You really need to anchor down the lathe bed, because all this force, there's no way this thing's going to stay put without being anchored down. Whether you clamp it, bolt it, whatever you do, but you've got to make it so it doesn't move, or you're just going to be wasting your time and frustrating the hell out of yourself. So without further ado, I'll just get into it. So you can see that's fairly even here. It does get a little bit harder up that end. And really, this is all it boils down to. It's just a very repetitive task, adjusting the tension as you go. I tend to do more adjusting on the back side, as I was saying, to keep that back area, so you're really kind of grabbing hold of that high area. Once you've got the front set, you probably only need to adjust the front maybe 50% of the time that you need to adjust the back. And a lot of the adjustment you do when you first set up. I've already been going at this for a while on the back here, and I've got a lot of the worst of it over and done with. I've already got a few hours into it, and believe me, it is no fun, and is particularly boring. The more aggressive papers are the harder to, they require the most effort, because you're trying to remove the most material. The main thing is don't try to take too much off at once, in order to try and think that you're going to save yourself some time, because you won't. You'll just be putting in a whole heap of effort, and you'll tend to destroy the paper quite quickly as well, rather than just going nice and steady, and just keep doing it. That's all you can do. It does work. I've been checking it with the micrometer here as I've been going, and I'm probably already 50% there. It's going surprisingly well. Keeping it well oiled is a must too, of course, on both sides. You want everything working in your favour, everything running as smoothly as possible. So basically what you're doing is you're reproducing the faces. So as we did when we were working on the saddle, we've reproduced this face onto this surface on both sides to give us our parallel flat surfaces. And on one of the previous videos I mentioned the order that I was going to use to do this, and that was the first step was to get this saddle right. And that is because now the underside face of this saddle is being transferred onto the underneath of the rear way via the back plates. If we were still on an angle, if this saddle was still tilting over, then the surface we'd be creating on the underside of this way here would be tilted as well. So just following the right steps in the right order to make sure everything stays in the way that you want it. As you can see, there's quite a lot of work in doing all this stuff on the mini lathe. I don't mind doing it. That's something I love doing. I love working on tools. I love building things. I love spending time in the shed with my tools and listening to a bit of music and just chilling out, just watching a bit of TV. I haven't always had this setup, but I have had it for a little while. Previous divorces have kept me in the poorhouse, you might say. Good with things, not with women. That's been my motto in life. I'm sure a few of you guys out there can relate to that one. And by no stretch of the imagination do I feel that I'm blame-free in my relationships, you might say. I am a man of many, many hobbies. I have many, many hobbies. And they do take up a substantial amount of my time. Which probably makes me not the greatest partner. What will I do tonight? Go and watch a chick flick with the missus? Or come out to the shed and build something? That's a tough one. Anyway. Oh, I've over-tightened it a bit. I don't think you guys really want to hear me ranting on anyway, so I'll just shut up and keep sanding. It's a little bit tight. That's what happens if you get a little bit too exuberant, you'll lock her up and you'll be really struggling to get it moving. And you can sort of push through it, but believe me, you're just wasting your time. You're better off just to get it to a nice tension that you're comfortable with working and just keep at it. It is surprising how quickly it all starts to level up. I can feel the tight spots as I'm going over it. I'm trying to keep it steady, but it's definitely tighter towards this end to push than it is down this end where it's kind of thinnest. And I'm slowly trying to push slightly further in. Admittedly, I don't really need to go up too much further than say here because the chuck hangs over to about here anyway, so there's not really going to be much saddle movement in this area anyway. But the more I push into it, the better it's going to be for the area preceding where it gets too tight. Because you can't stop right up to it with a step. You've got to slowly taper into the high spot. And the further I go into the high spot, the more the tapered section is better and more closer in the spec. I might shut up and put a bit of music on for you guys. That's probably a good idea. I've been going at this side for quite a while now, and I've got it pretty close to where I want it to be. I've just been over it with the micrometer, and I'm now getting a consistent reading of 9.06 millimeters neat in all the positions along here, and I'm very happy about that. So a few hours work and it's looking really, really good. It does still start to thicken up right at the very end. Even when I get to here, I'm still doing 9.06 neat. It's not until right up the very tip here. I've got about 9.7 there, and it jumps up to about 9.13 up there, but realistically I'm probably looking at about this much travel here by the time the headstock, back plate, the chuck, you know, then you've got your saddle with the tool holders and everything on it. I don't think starting to thicken up in this area here is ever really going to be a problem. If I find it is a problem, I'll just revisit it later, go back through the same process and work on that. So I think that edge is pretty much done. I will probably go over everything with lapping paste. Once I've got everything to where I want it, I will probably lap all the surfaces together with paste, and which will bring me up a bit of quite a polish on all of the ways, and the underside of all the saddle and everything will probably polish up quite nicely. I'll just take you across and show you the papers and stuff. So these are a couple of the papers that I was using. I do have an in-between grit that's in the bin that I haven't sort of fished out, but this is the 40 that I started with earlier. You can see that it's got a lot of build up. I've been cleaning taking this apart and using WD-40 to clean all of the, as long as the abrasive is still reasonably good, just using WD-40 to clean off all this build up to expose all the abrasive. See, there's probably not a lot of abrasive on that corner. It's either the back corner or the front corner. And what I've been doing with these two, as I've been using them, I set them up long on one side. As you can see, the holes in the center of this aren't in the center, so the pieces that I was cutting, I'd wear the abrasive down on one side and then flip the piece around and then just recut that edge because it would hang over a bit, and just use it like that. At least that way I get two goes out of each piece, and it works really well. So this is the final one that I've been finishing with. This is about 240. Same process, same deal. I've used both sides. I've actually used a few of these, and it works exceptionally well. You can see there's quite a slurry on the shim here of lathe bed and abrasive mixed with WD-40. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with the back way now. So I'll set up and do the front. I must say that was very successful. I've just mounted a back plate. I've actually mounted one of the old back plates up under here because I'm using the back plate that I've made under the front to start addressing this front edge. And I've just been mucking around and just nipping these up. And previously, as you saw, I could tighten it up here so I still had movement, and then I couldn't push it along any further. And what I've done is I've nipped up these nuts so that it starts to get tight in this area, which was previously the thinnest section. Then I've just backed them off slightly so that I have free movement, and I'm now able to go all the way up. It gets a little bit tight when it gets right to this end here, but that is just fantastic. And there is no movement. It's not loose at all. Whereas previously, to get it to this point, we had to loosen it off. We had to loosen the back plate off so much that when we came back, there was just so much movement in it. So I'm pretty happy with that, considering that's just one of the old back plates. So we're coming up on 25 minutes. We're going to have to cut this into a two-part video, I think. So we'll call this part 1. And in part 2, I'll switch over to the front side. Apologies for a bit of a boring video. Unfortunately, it just takes so long and there's so much to do. And there's so much to show you guys. Really, it's hard to cut it down any further. But the results are really good and speak for themselves. I appreciate you watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you for part 2 in the next one. Thanks again.